White House advisors briefing senior lawmakers on the Syria situation last night, and the administration is expected to release a declassified intelligence report today on last week's chemical weapons attack that killed hundreds of Syrians. Republican Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma was on that call last night, one of 26 members of Congress. He is a ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he joins us now. This is something that Congress has been calling for, a personal plea on the part of the administration. What did they say to you last night? What key points did they make?
Well, first of all, Heather, it was an hour and a half of John Kerry trying to sell us on the president's program of military intervention in Syria. And there's a new term you're going to hear over and over and over again, as we did last night, called a broad range of options. Secretary Kerry said that we were going to offer the president a broad range of options. But, you know, we talked for an hour and a half, and they didn't mention one of the options. My concern is this, and I have to say that I'm the only member who is opposed to military intervention. And I am because of what's happened to the military. We don't have the resources, we don't have the assets to get involved in another conflict.
But yet you have said that you're opposed to military action, correct me if I'm wrong, unless a broader strategy about our role in that region of the world is laid out and a budget comes forward for this.
Well, where would the budget come from? Let's face it, the military has been so degraded in the last 4.5 years under the Obama administration that we're now furloughing people. In my state of Oklahoma, 20,000 people are on furloughs working from military bases. They have grounded 14 squadrons, flying squadrons. I mean, that's how desperate things are in the military.
And certainly the question
is, so we
is,
just don't have the assets.
Do we have the money to pay for this? You mentioned a broad range of options that Secretary Kerry was laying out, but not getting into any kind of specifics. You know, there's a problem here, and that could be mission creep. If we go into there, if we launch some airstrikes, where does it all end? Was that answered for you?
No, it was not answered, and that was my point. And as I said, Heather, I was the only one who said we can't have military intervention in Syria. It isn't going to work. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, you can do it clean and go in and send a cruise missile in and everything's going to be fine. You won't get our hands dirty. That's not the way it works. In fact, on your program yesterday, Ollie North made it very clear that that would not work. You're going to get, if you have military intervention, you're going to get involved again. We can't afford to do that.
And that could certainly end up, you know, some would argue with boots on the ground there in Syria, with our military already stretched so thin. So I'm wondering if you spoke with any members of Congress after this call and if there was any sort of consensus coming out from them.
No. In fact, I stayed on the call for an hour and 15 minutes. I missed the last 15 minutes. And most of the responses were very similar to mine, but they didn't take a position in opposition to it. I know that's not a very popular thing to do. But most of them, many of them, are not aware of what's happened to our military. Right now, taking the projected budget of this of the President Obama, that would take $487 billion out of the military, and that's not with sequestration. So we just don't have the assets to do it right now. And I agree. In fact, if I could just read one quote from Admiral Winfield, and he's the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said, "We could, for the first time in my career, have instances where we may be asked to respond to a crisis, and we would have to say we cannot."
Meaning a crisis elsewhere in the world if something crops up, something certainly to be very aware of.
Well, we could have a crisis facing us. I mean, let's face it, the big problem in the Middle East is Iran, and our intelligence tells us that they're going to have the ability to have a weapon and a delivery system by 2015.
Well, and
that's pretty scary when you think about that, Heather.
And they are certainly watching how closely, they're watching closely how we are handling this right now. I'm wondering if you think this whole discussion about launching an attack on Syria is more about the president saving face over those comments about a red line, or is this anything about preserving or saving America's national security? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, he should not have said what he said when we talked about the red line. It was bad enough to say that, but then not to define what the red line was, and when they had crossed the red line, that put us in a situation where the president has to do something, and so Now the effort is to try to get the leadership of Congress, and I think all 26 of us were on that phone call yesterday, to try to support him in this. Now look what happened. Right during the meeting that we had, that hour and a half, we heard that Great Britain decided to bag this thing and not to become involved. Well, that happened during the hour and a half. So things are not moving in their direction. I just think, and one last thing has got to be said. There's an assumption, Heather, that if we do this, that we're going to stop what they're doing right now in terms of gassing their own people. I'm not ready to accept that assumption, but I am concerned very much about us getting a military intervention that never is easy, and it's not going to be one that's going to be clean and quick.
So the highlight of this is you're going to need a heck of a lot more information, you and your fellow members of Congress, before we do anything on this. Senator, thank you so much. Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma was on that call last night, and we'll see what comes out of the White House today.
And we mentioned this at the top of the hour, too. You know, a couple of days ago, Heather, they said that some of this classified information would be made public.
Yeah.
Some of it, and we're still waiting on that.
Yeah, some declassified information supposed to come out, but apparently this call last night was not on secure telephone lines, meaning that no classified information could be presented to those members of Congress. So, as the senator pointed out, all the information coming out was pretty vague there last night.
So we'll watch that story and see whether or not that unclassified info comes out today. So 22 minutes before the hour.